You probably already know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If vehicle auctions are your main source of acquiring used inventory, you're doing it wrong. You're overpaying. You're chasing after the same cars every other dealer is chasing after. You're fighting with other dealers to only pay fees, pay transport, paying to recondition the vehicle, and then maybe about 14 to 21 days later, you try to sell it and any potential gross has already depreciated right out of that vehicle. The best vehicles, they're not in lane 4 at ADESA, they're not on OVE, they're right under your nose in your service lane. This episode is about flipping your strategy before another month goes by and before you're stuck blaming the market for what you neglected or even worse, for what you refused to fix. This is the show that makes you money. This is Follow the Money. Follow the Money is brought to you by Cars Commerce, empowering local dealerships with solutions to simplify and scale their businesses. It is time, my friends. Let's get to work. Brian Kramer, my friend. Brian, so great to have you once again on Follow the Money, my friend. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here.
Let me hit you with the first, with the first question. Why are so many dealers still auction dependent? Or should I maybe say auction addicted, even when they know that it's setting themselves up for failure? Are they just lazy? Or is that just the way that it's always been done? Or are they just stuck in a bad habit?
No, it's definitely easy, and it's a go-to that everybody knows that they can jump into at any time, and they can, it's like flipping a light switch, right? You can get vehicle inventory on the lot, and it's a Band-Aid until we figure out a real sourcing strategy, which everybody's been kicking the can down the road for forever. I think that's part of it. The other part of it is I don't know that most dealers really know the math or really think about the math on how much it's costing them. If you've got a 100-car inventory and you're getting even just 30, which I think is actually a pretty good number because most of the dealers that I see in the industry are at 50%. If you're getting 30% of your inventory at the auction, and I just have some rough math, you've got, you're talking about auction fees. I'm showing the average auction fees between $350 and $650, which there's, I've seen them frequently for $1,000, $2,000, but that's just the average, including junk cars and independents, which is the bulk of it. $150 to $600 in transport fees. So I'm hitting these low. $90 to $150 for post-sale inspection, PSI fees. So on average, you're talking about $600 to $1,400 in average auction PSI transport fees. That's just average. There's going to be some that are a lot more. Maybe there's some that are going to be less. But when you're talking about direct from consumer acquisition, your auction fees are zero. Your transport fees are zero. Your PSI is zero. Your overall auction PSI transport, zero. And that's, second part of it. Third part of it is the average consumer acquisition vehicle retails in 28 days. The average vehicle sourced from auction, in the case study that we did recently with David Spizak, 44 days. So if you're talking 44 days versus 28 days, the average vehicle in America runs out of gross profit at 32 days. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that's going to happen, not to mention the variability of the auction car coming in that you don't know, you haven't scanned it with an OBD2 scan tool. You haven't been able to go around and take a look, listen for upper engine noise, lower engine noise, everything that goes into appraising a vehicle, zooming in all the curb rash, how accurate are condition reports? I mean, that's, in all these Facebook groups, it's a comical meme that's going around talking about how inaccurate CRs are. Well, everything we just mentioned, Frank, you don't have to deal with on your service drive or your own, vehicle buy center on your website, or just buying cars from consumers and just hitting them with a reasonable number. And there's a multitude, I'm sure we'll get into it, of reasons that cause this and what dealers can do to fix it. But it's really an easy fix, but it's not. It takes work, and it takes discipline, and it takes daily discipline, and it takes a daily focus on relentless execution. And I think that it's a combination of how much work is required in addition to the knowledge and the awareness of it. And I'll put a pin in it with this last thing. If you think about it, you and I've been doing this for a long time. And let's talk about F&I. F&I, I remember when I got an F&I in, the mid late 90s, it was $300-$400 was a good job in F&I. There wasn't any reserve. There was some flats or whatever, and it was prorated payments and all that weird stuff back then. But it wasn't like it is today, right? And then all of a sudden, it got $800-$900 was a pretty good job. And what did that require? That meant that we're going to have an interview. Now we're going to present a menu sometimes.
Yeah,
and
menu.
And it actually used to be optional to go into F&I, if you remember. Somebody like, hey, this guy's in a hurry. They're not going to wait for F&I. We just need to print out the paperwork and have it ready to go for them. And that was actually a thing.
Right.
And we allowed it. Then it was 100% of the time with 100% of the customers, 100% the same way. No exceptions whatsoever. The interview takes place out on the showroom floor. Then if they're not running the numbers, then we're going to bring in a third party, consultant that's going to perform core competencies on them to figure out where it is that their objection handling skills are failing. And now if somebody's not at $1,500 or $2,000 plus, now all of a sudden all those things are happening. And it's not that when everybody used to say, oh, that's crazy, you could run those kind of numbers. It's not crazy if you do all of those things. And to your point with your initial question, running $2,000, $3,000 on the front or more, plus $2,000 on the back on used cars is not crazy. And I see dealers doing it. I'm visiting 2 dealers tomorrow that are doing it right now with thousands and thousands of sales per month. But they are more focused on, did we walk around every single vehicle? What's the variance of what the appraisal showed in terms of reconditioning to what it actually, and holding people accountable to it, to what it actually showed up in your your general ledger balance. And that level of execution, measurement, and accountability, you and I see it in certain stores around the country, but I don't see it, industry wide yet.
No, you definitely don't. And well, let me just recap these numbers because I wrote them down as you went through them, Brian. Right? The average vehicle, $600 to $1,400 in fees, anywhere from $600 to $1,400. Brian, I'll be honest. I think you're a little on the low side, starting at $600. I think it's even higher than that. But I'm going to trust you. You're the authority, right? $600 to $1,400.
I'm doing that. Everybody always wants to debate it, but even at $600, take 30 cars out of 100 car inventory. That's $18,000.
Right.
1,000, it's $30,000. Yet nobody will pay for that extra manager that they need, or they won't pay for the advertising to drive the traffic. And that's you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, absolutely. 28 days to sell a vehicle that you acquire on your own. 44 days to sell a vehicle that you acquire at an auction. Yet it takes on average 32 days for that vehicle to depreciate. For the time that you have it, 32 days later, any type of profit has already depreciated out of the vehicle. It almost makes...
Let me give you the skeptic's answer to that.
Okay.
Just for anybody who's listening, because they're going to go, whoa, because there's going to be a group out there, and there's some
I know where you're going
to this, right? They're going to say, well, hold on a second, because if we have that car, then what if we generate a trade, and what if we get financing, and we're the strongest, within 3 states in F&I, and we average more than anybody, so that works out. Here's the problem: is that with used car, if you go pre-COVID, half the customers finance with you on used cars. You had 50% finance penetration, and you also had 40, 50% trade capture on transactions. But that's not the way it is in 2025. In 2025, right. Here's the numbers: 30% is the finance penetration, because you've got credit union, and it's not all cash. Credit unions, outside liens, people quoting rates that are way too high, not competitive. Through their BDCs, so they've already, just like CarMax, they've sold their trade, they've sold their financing as well before they come in. Now let's talk about trades. 26% of used car transactions last year had a trade-in. 26%. So if you're basing your business model on and rolling the dice, maybe I'll get a trade and maybe I'll get some financing. You're going to play those odds 26% of the time or 30% of the time. You're just basically handing over your lunch money that the house wins 70% of the time.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, you're the coach. You're the coach who decides. Who basically decides to go for it on 4th and 15 every single time. Once in a while, are you going to get the first down? Sure, of course. Once in a while, yeah. I agree. You are, but the percentage is like in the teens. But if somebody was to do that, they would get thrashed on SportsCenter the next morning. But dealers make this exact same type of a decision each and every single day. Maybe this, maybe that, maybe that. I don't know, Brian. I don't want no maybes, man. I want to work the highest percentage of probability for every single thing that I do. Now, let me be the skeptic for a second over here, because you said earlier about how the only thing that really needs to happen is that we give the customer a reasonable number for their trade, right? When we're working service acquisition, that we give the customer a reasonable number. Now, this is where I gotta hit you, because you're going to have a lot of dealers who are going to say, but I need to bring every trade in and I need to hook them all $3,000, because just look at all the numbers you just went over and this time and all this type of stuff. And you're going to have a whole bunch of other dealers that are going to sit there and go, yeah, well, I've heard Brian say this before, but I really don't know what he's talking about, much less do I know even how do I come up with a reasonable number. So put it like as simple as possible, like step 1 through 3. How does somebody come up with that reasonable number to be able to acquire that vehicle?
So the first thing is you have to look at online, virtual, sight unseen. Everybody that hasn't wrapped their mind around, and there's a decent amount out there, but everybody hasn't wrapped their mind around the fact that that there's 2 million cars a year out of 15 million available being sold to Carvana and CarMax because they're doing this. If you haven't wrapped your mind around that yet, you need to, like, immediately, because they're the reason why we're at less than 50% or 35% is the number new and used as how many transactions have a trade. 35%.
35%.
Lower on used than it is on new. And so if you're still waiting to get them in, or I'm just going to hit them low and see what they say because they're going to hit too high, what I find is there's 3 different reasons why dealers don't want to do it. Either first reason, they think they're leaving money on the table, meat on the bone because they're hitting them too low. But what if I could do this? You have to look at trade capture. Trade capture is what percentage of your trades or your transactions have a trade in. If you're not at 50%, you got a problem. It needs to be at 70%. That's the number. So if you're not at that number, go there first before you start worrying about the gross, because the $200 or $300 or $500 that you're picking up and you say, oh, I remember the one time I $2,000 or $3,000. Forget about the outliers. This is a money ball numbers game. You need to be taking swings at the bat. You wouldn't advertise your ad cars at MSRP or $5,000 over MSRP because you want to drive traffic. The new traffic of the new generation is trade-ins.
Yes.
CarMax and Carvana reinvented the game. They disrupted this whole thing. If you want traffic, you put it everywhere on every tab you can on your website, in your service drive, QR codes that link to your appraisal tool. We have AccuTrade, obviously, and we automate that. We'll track from when they scan to when they get appraised to when they are acquired. And then soon we'll be tracking how profitable that source is versus service drive versus virtual, and looking at it, all that way. You can't just look at traditional look to book in the showroom and not look at look to book in the service drive, look to book on sight unseen appraisals, on your website leads. Right. You have to have an acquisition culture, and the best dealers out there are doing that. But here's where I see the second part of it that breaks down. The ones that don't want to give a number, it's because they don't have confidence in their salespeople, or they don't have enough appraisers because they won't empower their salespeople to do the initial part of it and train them. So they don't have a catch-all. Some of these big public aggregators average $900 deductions during the active trade appraisal side by side with the client as they're walking around the vehicle together. Yes. Not just a hidden behind a curtain. Hey, this is what your car is worth. Why is it? Because that's all it's worth. That's the auction. Right. And so they need to be able to say, Frank, remember we walked out there, the curb rash, remember that little door ding we talked about? Yep. By the way, your service was due and all those things. That's why. And here's a presentation that shows you all of that. The other part of it is the third reason I hear is in all these 20 groups that I do, is that the dealers will, and these are legitimate things that happen, right? They're thoughts, but they'll say that the customer's expectations are too high. So, and they're not going to be transparent, and they're going to say it doesn't need anything and the car is completely perfect. That happens too. But isn't the goal just to get the appointment? So why argue with them? Why not have that conversation once they've come in for the appointment and you got them in? That's the conundrum to me, is that everybody wants them to come in, but nobody wants to give them the information that will allow
that
them
makes
to
them come
so
in.
Intelligent, right?
Yeah, nobody wants to give the information that they're looking for to have them come in. We've said this before, probably to each other in private and also on formats like this. We've said it so many times how the customer saying, "Hey, what do you think my vehicle is worth?" is the same thing as the customer saying, "Hey, what's your best price?" Which is the same thing as me saying, "Hey, Brian, what time is it?" Like, to the customer, it's that simple. It's like, "Hey, what time is it?" And if you don't answer the question, that's it. The trust is gone because you look weird. Else. Yeah. And because someone else will answer sooner or later, somebody else is going to answer, so
it takes 30 seconds. They've done it to me in the showroom right in front of me. They said, "No problem here. They start shopping 2 or 3 other people that will buy the car." And
one of them in front of you, sitting right there.
They pulled up 30 minutes later in front of my dealership and picked up the trade.
So if they'll do it, if they can do it, if they will do it, why are we any different? Why are we at some kind of a disadvantage? We're not. We're just not putting in the work. We're not putting in the work to educate ourselves, and we're not putting in the work to be able to acquire these vehicles and put all of these percentages of probability into our favor to actually play Moneyball. Everybody right now is, going back to Moneyball, because I just watched it the other night, is Art Howe saying like, "No, I'm not playing Hattiesburg. No, I'm not pitching this guy. No, I'm not doing this," right? Because he wants to stay in the traditional way of doing it. But then as soon as he was forced to play those players, the A's started winning, right? Let's switch from acquisition on trade. I want to talk about the service lane, because I believe that the service lane, from my experience talking to dealers about acquiring out of the service lane, it's like this. It's the blind leading the blind in the dark room. So paint the picture for those that are blind and can't see. What does a great service lane sourcing process actually look like? Where do most dealers mess this up? Is it the people? Is it the tech? Or is it lazy that they just, I hate to keep using that word, but it's the only word I can think of. Is it just plain old laziness that they won't put in the work to actually learn how to do this?
I don't think that it's laziness. I think, and what I'm going into is, I've seen a lot of people do it really well. My dealership still does it really, really well. They acquired over 150 vehicles last month off the service drive, and they've got a team that's just, amazing at doing it. But I would say that the opposite is actually true. It's not about being simple. It's actually, you almost need the blind leading the blind when it comes to service drive acquisition. And here's the reason why. Forever, I used equity mining tools forever, but there's not that many people. There's a very, very small percentage of people that are currently in loans that have equity at the moment. It just is what it is. So what I found is all these different people we were approaching, and I would sit there and survey them when I was the GM of the store, and always ask them, what could we have done differently? And we were very non-invasive with how we went about it. But the feedback that I got was that most people were like, well, you're asking me, because the word track was always, what if I could get you out of your vehicle into another newer, similar vehicle, at a similar payment with little or no money down? You'd obviously consider that, right? And that's what happened, is that it got so played out. They saw it coming, first thing. Second thing is, when we went back and looked at who transacted, we did 1,600 acquisitions one year off the service drive, and went back and looked at what did they drive in versus what did they leave in. And 53% of them, which I've heard a lot of numbers that are higher than this, but 53% of them bought a completely different model than what they pulled up in. So that word track is paralyzed immediately, right? You're eliminating half of them.
Yeah, you're eliminating half the people right away.
If you look at the 11% that have equity and you want to trade them out and keep them at a similar payment, what's the 11% of the time? So 89% of the time, that strategy doesn't work either. So you're trying to figure out who the buyers are. If you tried to figure out who has a certain year, make, model, trim, and that's who you're going to approach, you're going to overanalyze, kill yourself with paralysis of decision making. Nobody will, which is what was happening to us. Nobody will ever get greeted. They will have a reason why every single person is just in for service. And
Yep.
in many cases, 43% of that store's business came from the service drive every single month.
Yep.
So when we acquired a Lincoln store next door, and everybody kept saying that, it had been a long time since I'd heard it. Hey, that they're just in for service. They're just in for service. I go, that 20 feet away, that's like half their business every single month. Well, Lincoln's a little bit different over here.
Yeah. This one's a little different. Not in this market, Frank. That doesn't happen in this market. Maybe in some of those other markets you go to, but not in this market. We've heard them all, right, Brian? We've heard every single one of them.
All of them. And I heard them there, but and I said, so 20 feet away, well, that's Toyota. I go, what's interesting is that, 5 years ago at Toyota, they said it could never happen there because it's Naples, and all the different, heuristics and biases that come with it. But the moral of the story is, I finally got so frustrated. We just recruited some non-automotive people from Starbucks and some other places, and they just started greeting people. As I started looking at all these deals, and they're acquiring eight, they're actually cradle to grave, so they sell them as well. 18 cars a month, and I'm looking at it. They all had like a lot of negative equity. I'm like, what's causing you to target all these people? He's like, what do you mean? I go, well, all this negative equity and these high interest rates, and he's like, I don't really know what any of that stuff means. Do you want me to start asking him those questions? And I'm like, no.
No.
But
keep going.
And eventually they all get there where they start pre-qualifying and they want to find an easier way, to your point. But the problem is there is no easy way. At least I haven't identified it yet. And I've been all over the country studying, experimenting, seeing different things. It requires rolling up your sleeves, walking up to customers, really the opposite of AI, and just asking them if the numbers made sense. Would they consider selling their vehicle if you paid them above market value for it? Which
Right.
You should be doing everywhere. But everybody goes, well, I don't want to show them that. Hit them at this, or they won't enable and empower their people. Number one problem. If you're not willing to do that and get a dedicated team, they don't have to put the ACVs on the cars. Obviously, we recommend using AccuTrade because it's competitive. It's within, we beat CarMax and Carvana 58% of the time on the right cars, for in the dealer's benefit. But we want to be able to automate something like that for speed. If you can't appraise a ton of cars per day, then they got to wait until the used car manager gets freed up, or the used car manager is done approving recon or doing the way too many things that every used car manager is overtasked with today. It's hard enough for them to do their job and appraise the showroom cars, let alone asking them to appraise all the service drive cars. You have to be able to enable your acquisition team to do the first 80% of it. And if you're not, I wouldn't even start. I would work on something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're totally right. Now, I'm going to share something that I heard last week at a dealership in a conversation just like this, right? Talking about service acquisition and that. And the dealer said to me, well, we don't do it. Get ready for this one, Brian. I want to know if you've heard this one before. We don't do it because, the service manager gets mad because that customer was there to do $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 worth of work, and then we trade the customer out of the car, and they don't get the work. So, is it important? Now, number one, have you ever heard that one before? That's the one I got. Have you ever?
Every time I heard in my own store.
Okay, you heard it in your own store. So, how can fixed ops and used car managers or acquisition teams, how can they work together without butting heads so that ultimately the thing that matters the most is that we acquire that vehicle, we keep that customer loyal to the dealership, which helps every single department, right? How do we make it so that the used car department, acquisition, and fixed ops can work together without butting heads?
There's got to be an alignment meeting. And here's when those service directors, and I love talking to service directors because and I run towards that, and I try to encourage that conversation because they're all thinking it. So anybody who's like, yeah, well, they'll be fine with it. No. You need to have the conversation and get everybody in the room, and let's just clear this up because it's just a matter of time before it blows up. And here's a scenario on what causes it to blow up. There's 2 or 3 things. First one is the advisor you're talking about sold $2,000 or $3,000 worth of work, or was pitching $2,000 or $3,000 work. Probably, in many cases might not have sold it, because the car might have been a wholesale piece, and multitude of different scenarios that can happen, right? But that vehicle does get taken in on trade. No matter what, they're going to look at it as they lost that money. But here's the worst part. Let's say that they do the recon, which they should do it every time, and they should make the service department whole. That's part of this equation. And the percentage of the time that's going to happen is very minimal. But that's how you create an acquisition culture, is you get everybody on board, the ASMs, the parts department, the service director. And so when that car comes in, there needs to be a champion at the sales department. It does, if it's an acquisition champion, whoever, it doesn't matter who the person is. Somebody has to they got to guard the process, but they've got to let the service director know before they leave which VINs did they acquire today. So they leave those ROs open so that for loyalty, they close it out in the customer's name, not in the used car departments. Yep. And it messes up your loyalty numbers. If there's a service contract that's still open, that was pending, that needs to be closed out in the customer's name, warranty issues. But most importantly, you cannot let that go back to the internal advisor. The internal tech that didn't sell the work, the advisor didn't sell the work, are now getting all of that work in the stall next to the CP advisors and technician that knows that work should have been his, and he's sitting on his toolbox watching them, working 12 hours a day because they can't handle all the work. Yep. So they just need to route that back to the CP advisor, and don't discount it. It should be done at door rate. If anything, find aftermarket parts to make it make sense, but you have to complete that work. If not, they're not going to be bought into it. The other thing is, don't go showing customers a car and leave a car out there without a hat tag in it and take the keys to block up the whole service drive. That's the second way to just, absolutely have an atomic meltdown with the service manager.
Yeah, I didn't even think
this is never going to work.
I didn't even think of that one, Brian. That's great. You're absolutely right. Don't just leave the car sitting over there, right? Like be aware and be conscious of the whole fact that the service department needs to continue to operate.
Well, then they come back from the test drive an hour later and work the numbers, and it doesn't make sense. And then they say, okay, is my car ready yet? Well, no, was that your car? We haven't started the oil change yet. And now you got a CSI issue. And now all of a sudden they go, that's why it doesn't work in this market at this store. Told you it was never going to work.
Right. Exactly. Told you that wasn't going to happen. Right. I mean, that's one of the biggest ones, and every single one of your points, Brian, is so spot on. Make sure that the work still gets done on the vehicle. Make sure it gets done at door rate. Don't go in, so to say, rape the service department and not have the work be done, because you ain't never going to get any help. You ain't never going to get any of that in any way. You're going to get somebody who's going to go to a service advisor, a customer, and say, "What do you think? You think I should trade it in?" And of course, that service advisor is going to say, well, I don't think it's that bad. If it was my car, I'd fix it. Why go and spend all the... And then then the whole thing explodes, right? The whole thing explodes.
And when you do it the way you're describing it, and they have skin in the game, they know that those lines on that report are coming back to them. You just weaponized your whole service advisor team to be salespeople, because whenever somebody goes, I'm going to go get a second opinion down the street at an independent service provider because, God, that seems like a lot of money. And they say, well, hold on a second, real quick, before you do that, let me just look into one more option. And now they're TOing it to a salesperson to try to trade them out.
Yeah.
And this, everybody listening to this should know this. The customers trust the service advisor more than the salespeople 9 out of 10 times. So they're going to go to that. So they use their service advisor as a third baseman validation of whether or not they're making a good decision. Don't underestimate the influence that those ASMs have on their customers.
Yeah, because they are a voice of reason. And like you said, they are the that third base coach that'll tell them either to stop right here, or no, go for home. It's totally clear to do that. Brian, as always, we're running out of time already, so I have to ask you to bring us home with this one. So let me hit you with this one, because we like dealers like the easy steps, like top 3 3 things to do right now. So give me the top 3 actions that a dealer should take today to stop overpaying and to start sourcing their used car inventory in a much smarter way. Top 3 actions that they should do, and they should start today.
Number 1, stop looking at look to book.
Wow.
And I know that this is going to be controversial, but everybody I talk to is at a 50% look to book. You're not the only one. If you're watching this podcast, what you need to be shifting your thinking is to what's your appraisal efficiency. Appraisal efficiency is, if I sell 100 cars, how many cars did I appraise? The number should be 200. So you should appraise twice as many cars as you're selling. And most everybody's going to go, well, yeah, I'm going to 50% look to book. No, if you take a look to see how many appraisals are in your system versus how many cars you sold, the average that we see is less than 1 to 1. That's a number you can't smoke. It just is what it is. So that number should be 2 to 1. The second metric in there should be trade capture percentage. That number should be at least 50%. The target should be 70. So if you sell 100 cars, you should have 70 trade-ins. If you have less than 50, or if you're in the 30s, which the average dealer is, you got a problem. And you're too reliant on the auctions, and that's the reason why. And you've got to, and then you start peeling it back from there. So that's the biggest number one of everything is you got to change the way you're looking at it. Go ahead.
So, Brian, where can dealers find these numbers like quickly before we move on to number two? Where can dealers find those numbers? The appraisal efficiency, right? The trade capture. Everybody knows where to get look to book, but where can they find those numbers?
Well, the problem is they don't exist today, and a lot of dealers are tracking them on their own spreadsheets. Within the next 2 weeks, AccuTrade will be releasing it in our dashboard so that AccuTrade dealers will be able to see it in an automated way. But every dealer should look at those are, in my opinion, those are the non-negotiables. That's the PVR and products per deal in F&I. Those are the metrics that the best dealers in the country are living, breathing, and dying by. And really the third metric that goes along into that, let's just go to these three. Okay. The third metric is mistrade percentage. So the dealers that we see, and we've got a study coming out very soon, next couple of weeks, of over 100,000 appraisals. And here's what we found. When you're at less than 1 to 1 appraisal ratio to sales, the trade capture is always below 50%. But typically when it's below 1 to 1, it's in the high 30s, low 40s at the best. And the mistrade percentage is going to be in the high teens to 20%. So 1 to 1 or less appraisals is going to equal, 40% or less trade capture, 20% mistrade percentage. However, and there's different buckets of this, but you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, 200%. And some dealers are even at 300%. But let's say you're at 200% appraisal efficiency. 200% appraisal efficiency is always over 50% trade capture. 50 to 60%, like 53 to 60% is what we see. And then the missed trades are below 10%. They're in single digits across the board. Those are the commonalities of it. So I think that a lot of dealers think if I appraise more cars, that's going to get more people to shop. But the data on a significant sample set clearly shows otherwise. So that's kind of you want to change your mindset. You start looking at those, and until you have those nailed, you should not be getting creative. You shouldn't be trying to under allow you. It's a numbers game, and whoever appraises the most vehicles acquires the most vehicles and misses the least amount of trades.
That's good. Say that last part again. Whoever appraises the most vehicles, say that again.
Whoever appraises the most vehicles acquires the most vehicles and misses the fewest percentage of trades.
Absolutely. I think that's the quote out of the whole episode. Okay, so that's number one. The other two things. What's number two?
Well, you've got to have a way to be able to. So as you increase the amount of cars that you're appraising, you've got to be able to have enough people to appraise them all. Think about F&I. F&I for every, depends on who you want to debate it with, but 65 to 85 to 90, whatever the number is that you think an F&I manager should be able to handle. When you get you start selling 50 or 60 more cars, you hire another F&I manager, right? But with used cars, it's not like that. Used cars, we hire based on how many cars we sold, not how many we appraised. So there's this big fit gap and problem. And there's not enough managers in used cars to appraise all the vehicles that need to be appraised. And most used car managers, I was one of these, are a micromanager control freak. And they don't want to relinquish any of that to anyone. So they want to do it all. And they end up working till midnight doing it. Yep. And they have to be willing to delegate. If you want to play this game, you want to compete with Kramer, Carvana, and all these other, even these private cap groups that are building, insert group name buyscars.com, which there's a ton of them sprouting up. We're powering a ton of them. So as they're building all of these and they're using SEO, SEM, which is the biggest clickbait, this, to be able to drive traffic to your site, everybody's curious what their trade's worth.
Yes.
Think about the traffic that goes to, USAA, Carvana, CarMax, all these public groups, everybody wants to know what's their trade worth. And that's what drives all the traffic. So if you want to get their PII, you want to get more leads, you lead with the trade. But you got to be able to have the staffing to be able to handle it once those leads arrive. The third thing you need to do is you need to make sure and mystery shop yourself and go through the process and go. You got two different worlds, right? CRMs are built to sell cars. They're not built to buy cars. So your BDC is probably not handling buy only leads in the same way. The worst thing you can do with these leads, you ask anybody who has a virtual group buying center, the number one fastest way, and service drive as well, to kill a prospect and take them out of the market to where they're just shopping, and take a buyer and turn them into a shopper, is immediately when they try to sell you their car, before you give them a trade number, ask them what they want to replace it with and start trying to focus on selection. Before you give them that trade number, it'll just absolutely, they go ghost and you won't hear from them again. And next thing you know, they're getting marked as a lost or dead deal 90 days later, and nobody knows why. And we don't honor that promise that we put all over the websites, on TV. We just want to buy your car. The banners out front and everywhere else. And then as soon as they say, hey, what's my car worth? Well, what do you think you want to replace it with? And they're like, oh, okay.
There we go again, right?
They lose interest.
Yep. Absolutely. And the one that I love right now, Brian, I'm sure you've seen it, is it says, the button says 10-second trade appraisal. Right? Sure. Maybe it's 10 seconds for you to hit the button and fill out the form, but it's going to feel like a prison sentence of 10 years for you to be able to actually get a number out of anybody. And everybody wonders why this is all going, why this
we
is
have
going
a way to
backwards.
fix that for dealers literally in 20 seconds or less. But they have to be willing to give that number to the client quickly and we'll guarantee it, even with a few, I think it's like down to 7 or 8 questions is all we need. And then we'll guarantee the number. But not everybody wants to give the client the number.
Yeah, which is amazing. Nobody wants to give the client the number, but everybody is more than willing to hook the client's trade for $3,000, right? Or to do, or to sell the customer the car, but nobody wants to give the customer a number. Brian, as usual, right? A lot of this comes down to this right here. So many people look for the silver bullet, or they look for the secret sauce, the secret recipe, but in essence, it's not there, man. It's not there. Stop looking for it. Every minute that you spend chasing after that, looking for that silver bullet, is a minute that you could be spending with fixing this and fixing your process and actually putting together a plan that actually makes sense, like Brian said, and you even shocked me, honestly, with the first one, stop looking at Look the Book. Like that is not the be all and end all, of all of the stats. Stop looking at Look the Book, and staff to be able to handle the appraisals, not handle the used car sales, which is the F&I example is the absolute perfect one. And also, I love the last one. Mystery shop yourself. I think that's the one, Brian, that everyone will have the hardest time with, because how often do you see a mirror in the general manager's office or in the dealer's office, right? There ain't no mirrors in there. So for them to actually look at themselves is kind of tough. Would you agree?
I learned that right before COVID, when I lost that car to Carvana, like I'm talking about, and they picked it up at the dealership. I still got a picture of it. And I sat there and, everybody knew that I was very upset. To say, look, that's a very minimalistic version of what happened. And so at the end of that day, on a Saturday, it was like 7:00 at night. Everybody's in the conference room. Okay, last customer's gone. It was another couple hours, which is nobody's idea of a good time on a Saturday night.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm like, I need to know every single step about what happened. I've now mystery shopped them since this happened, and these other 10 different groups. And I was showing it side by side. Look at their site. Look at our site. Look at what happens here. Look at how easy this is. And that was a rude awakening for me. And it wasn't hard for me to realize why we were, below. We were in the 45% range when it came to trade capture for a brief period, because I didn't realize how much better everybody had gotten around me.
Isn't that amazing? All you have to do is really just look at yourself, right? That's all it comes down to, is look at yourself. So dealers, I need you to hear me, and really, I need you to hear me right now. You're not, right, in the buy cars at the auction business. You are in the margin control business. And every time you go to the auction, before you go to your own customers, You are literally lighting profit on fire. Tariffs or no tariffs, whatever it is that's going on at any time. This game is about who controls the pipeline. Who controls the vehicles that are coming in, and what in the world is it that you are doing with the opportunities? As always, my good friend Brian Kramer, thank you for laying it out plain, right? Plain and simple, which honestly I believe is your secret to success, is just honest, good, open eyes. This is really what it is. This is really what's going on. I can try to fight it in my mind all I want, but guess what? It's still what's going on. Brian Kramer, last words for everybody on this episode.
Don't wish it was easier. Wish that you could get your teams better. That's what I would say is you should be going on offense instead of playing defense to everybody else, and they should be fearing you and reallocating their marketing dollars to another market because they can't penetrate your market because your team is doing all of those things. They're handling the inbound calls perfectly. They're giving competitive values online. They're even willing to go to a client's house and, beat them at their own game. That's how I would be looking at this. That's the only way I'd be looking at this.
Oh, absolutely. Brian, once again, thank you so much. I would say, how do people find you? But it's very simple. Everybody, I think, knows how to find you. I think you're one of the easiest guys in automotive to get a hold of, no matter where it is, Facebook, LinkedIn, you are there. And absolutely, there's always good information that's coming from my friend Brian Kramer. And friends, if you haven't seen the last few episodes, go back. And I mean, go back today and binge them. Really, binge watch every one of them all the way through, because this show is the only place where you're going to get real retail talk with real leaders who know how to make real money. Once again, I'm Frank J. Lopes, retail car guy strategist, and the one who's bringing you what's working right now, not what worked 3 years ago, what's working right now. This is Follow the Money. Stop chasing and start sourcing smart, and we'll see you all next time.